Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Between the Buried and Me, titled Coma Ecliptic. Oh, I bet there's a whole slew of you out there that are pretty surprised that I'm covering this album. See, I'll admit that I don't cover a ton of metal outside of a few specific genres, notably towards the progressive metal or symphonic metal or power metal side. So my choice to talk about a group that's crossed plenty of genres but probably falls closest across most of their albums to technical death metal probably raised a couple eyebrows. Well, funny story. I got into Between the Buried and Me in university, basically on a couple suggestions that I should check out Alaska and Colors because they were apparently genre-bending masterpieces. But unlike an act like Cynic or Devin Townsend, where I immediately found a lot to like and really grab onto, Between the Buried and Me took a fair bit longer to really grow on me and gel with me. Mostly because they're a complicated band, known for dramatic switch-ups mid-song in tone, tempo, or even genre that could be jarring as hell for a casual listener. I can appreciate the killer musicianship and some underrated and really quite clever songwriting, but finding cohesive songs a little bit trickier, especially on their first two albums. But once they had a stable lineup, solidified some more of their sound, and worked out a more cohesive flow within their songs, they had the 1-2 punch of Alaska and Colors. And while I liked Alaska, I goddamn love Colors. A phenomenally cohesive, strikingly memorable, and powerfully evocative album that grows on me with every single listen. Oh, I love that album. But after those two, well, I did like The Great Misdirect, but I was also getting the impression that the genre crossing was starting to come at the very steep price of cohesion, especially when some of the writing couldn't always bridge that gap. The album only had 6 songs, but several went over 10 minutes, and enough ideas for a good 4 songs apiece. You could have taken out some of that genre bending, and for a more cohesive songs, it probably would have turned out a lot better. There was a little bit more focus on the Parallax albums, an EP and a full-length release in 2011-2012, but the more I listened through them, the more I saw the cohesion just not being there as much as it was at their best albums, and the integration of more keyboard and more electronic segments to drive melody in their production oddly didn't help. But okay, hey, they were on a new label at that point, right? Maybe their newest album, another concept album, might be able to recapture some of that old magic for them. So I checked out Coma Ecliptic. Did it pay off? Well, I sure as hell wasn't expecting this. And perhaps the band's most jarring shift to date, and that's saying something given them Between the Buried and Me, they sliced away so much of their death metal focus that I'd just be inclined to call this a straight up progressive metal album with some dirty vocals on occasion. Not since Opeth dropped Heritage that I've seen a transition like this. And disconcertingly, I'm not sure it was a great idea. And this is coming from somebody who listened to far more progressive metal than technical death metal. I should like this transition. And yet, even though it's probably Between the Buried and Me's most accessible album of their entire career, it feels like there's something missing here that keeps it from being one of their best. It's a good album for sure, but not a great one. So okay, let me start by saying that on a fundamental level, the compositional elements of Between the Buried and Me, they are consistent. Complicated melodic progressions that rarely fit into any conventional definition of hook, excellent musicianship and stringing together some phenomenal progressions, and abrupt genre-bending transitions between tempos and time signatures or even styles within songs. And in principle, to shift to more outright progressive material, it's not a bad idea. The smoother, lighter guitar tones probably lead to greater cohesion between transitions, and I've always liked their melodic composition. I think it's underrated. And sure enough, we get some strikingly beautiful moments on this album. Whenever we get a melodic guitar solo like on Turn on the Darkness, it sounds outright fantastic. And the melodic accents supplementing every single groove really are potent. From the Queen-esque contrast between the staccato riffs and the piano and the comb machine, to that nasty as hell guitar tone on Famine Wolf, and that excellent piano guitar segment on the last third of the ectopic stroll, the great melodic groove that drives Memory Palace to the most thick and potent roiling groove in the piano accent and closer Life Envelop, and the drumming is goddamn excellent across the board, with Blake Richardson bringing in a progressive intensity that might not have the same low-end punch as previous albums. For the most part, it really works here, and sure enough, as I suspected, the transitions are as smooth as they've ever been, some of their best. But here's where we run into the first big shift in the production, and that's the shift between melody and groove. Now, normally I'd have no problem with a more increased melodic focus, and a band like Between the Buried and Me, they're innovative enough in their compositions melodically that I won't really complain here. But in the choice to go for a lot lighter tones, the thicker grooves are significantly softened, usually just left as staccato punchlines or just accent pieces, and unfortunately it means that the bass lines are a lot less interesting or prominent, instead placing a lot more focus on the synthesizers or the keyboards or just outright electronic beats, like the electronic interlude Dim Ignition that really should be a lot better than it is. This is arguably where I have my first big issue, and that many of these songs just feel top-heavy, overloaded and cluttered in the upper to mid-range, but lacking in the low end in terms of driving groove. And when we do get it, the rhythm guitars and bass have nowhere near the texture or punch that they used to have. And for as many of these songs, they remind me of Porcupine Tree in the choice of their guitar tones or their acoustic elements to emphasize that very clean, very misty, melancholic atmosphere, it feels lacking in that underlying bass foundation. And if the synth tones were better, I'd probably be able to overlook more of this, but between Dim Ignition, the blubbery haze of tones over Paul Wagner's vocals on Turn on the Darkness that is piled on even thicker on Rapid Calm, I'm left wishing that they could be as defined or potent those synth lines as, say, the Guilt Machine or Arion tracks from which the best ones are inspired, like on Memory Palace or the accent moments on the chorus and on Turn on the Darkness. Hell, I even like the vaudeville-esque balance of the ectopic stroll. I couldn't help but remember that Diablo Swing Orchestra did this a lot better and actually managed to give their rhythm guitars some real crunch to them. I miss that here. And on that note, we need to talk about Tommy Rogers' vocals, arguably the most frustrating part of this album. The biggest problem for me is a complete lack of consistency. His growling and dirty vocals, they're fine, even if they do feel a little bit awkward against this type of production. But the rest of the time he splits between imitating Steven Wilson or Mike Patton of Faith No More. And while he's passable at the former, he stumbles really hard in the latter case, mostly because he doesn't have the richer timbre in his lower range to really kill these moments, complete with electronic or fuzzy vocal filters trying to add an edge, and only adding more production clutter that he doesn't need. But the larger issue is that there's quite a few songs where Rogers tries to go for a stickier, more pop-friendly chorus, and the increasingly heavy multi-tracking on his voice only emphasizes how painfully out of his depth he is. He just isn't fit for those big soaring choruses that he wants in progressive metal, and that is a bit of a problem. And this takes us to the lyrics. And sure, might as well deal with this right out of the gate. If we're looking for albums exploring memories and making the choice between light and death coming out of a coma state, this isn't Arian's The Human Equation, and it couldn't help to rise to that level. That album's a classic, this is not. But then again, the themes to this album they are far bleaker, closer to the Devin Townsend Project's last album, Z-Squared, Sky Blue, and in terms of its acceptance of death and hope that something might be lurking in the great beyond. Of course, the underlying motives behind those themes are significantly different. When our unnamed protagonist revisits his memories and life throughout this album, he finds savage animal spirits, empty religion, unchecked nihilism, and a sense of frustration that culminates in the ectopic stroll, where going back again and again only reveals the futility of life itself. And while one last try is made to go back and try again on Rapid Calm and Memory Palace, they're really an exercise in futility, and death comes as that final relief. Now, if you're familiar with Between the Buried and Me's discography, the motives behind these themes is nothing new. They've done this before, they've written about it before, and frequently. And that might be why I just feel a little bit cold on the lyrics of this album. Sure, they're very vibrant and descriptive. The line "stubborn computer savior" on King Redeem, Queen Serene, just fantastic for describing an imagined deus ex machina. But as I've said before, sheer nihilism without a greater purpose doesn't really interest me at all. And in this case, I can't help but feel that the album's arc lacks a lot of dramatic power for me. Death is treated as a relief or a great curiosity from the very first song, and its acceptance at the end has some finality to be sure, but it feels inevitable upon every re-listen. The narrator starts at the same place that he ultimately ends on this album, and that is a bit of a problem. So okay, where do I fall with the Coma Ecliptic? Well, here's the funny thing. Like on every Between the Buried and Me record, I find more little things to like with every single listen. Little subtleties in composition and the guitar work that are goddamn amazing. Seriously, the guitars really gotta be singled out as excellent here. But I also find more that frustrates me every single listen as well. For a concept record, I just get this thudding sense of anticlimax. The progressive shift is very interesting, but it lacks the thicker melodic grooves it needs to really anchor it for me. And for as much as Tommy Roger tries, and he really is trying, he's overshadowed by his influences here. Not a bad album by any stretch, let me stress this, which is why it's getting a light 7 out of 10, but it's not their best by a considerable margin. If you're a fan of progressive metal and you're looking for a challenging album to be soon, you'll find a lot to like with this. But if you miss the technical death metal albums or the sharper edge, you're gonna be left kind of feeling underwhelmed with this album. And I'm not sure Coma Ecliptic rises above that loss. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation or any other albums coming up that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.